Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ryan Wilcox. I'm the sports editor of the Daily Tar Heel. Joined by Chapel Fowler, senior writer at DTH, and Steve Kirschner. You can introduce yourself if you want.
I'm the senior associate AD for communications. I'm the basketball communications director at UNC.
Sweet. Yeah, we're super happy to be joined by Steve and Chapel. We're going to be talking about UNC-Oregon 2017 Final Four. I think there's a lot of reasons why I want to talk about this game, but number one is just like the way this game was kind of forgotten a little bit. It gets sandwiched in between the Kentucky game and the Gonzaga game. But just like obviously a wild last minute, if anyone can remember that. What first of all, I want to ask, what did y'all remember from this game, and what did you forget from this game? What jumped out at you upon the rewatch?
Chapel?
Um, well, I think I appreciated more just Kennedy Meeks is like, I mean, this kind of felt like the culmination of 4 years of, hard work. And, he lost all that weight and he was just up and down the floor every single time in this game. And the touch was great. Ducking between 2, 3 guys. Really points whenever they needed him. I think he had like 20 with 15 minutes left in the second half. Something like 6 or 7 offensive rebounds early in the second half. I think he tied a career high in scoring, if I remember correctly, Steve. Perfect stage to do it on. And in terms of, let's see, I have some notes here. In terms of what I forgot, more just that besides Kennedy, like the big men did struggle in this game. So his performance was just even more important because of that, statistically wise, at least. Isaiah had that dunk, but besides that, I think that was just one field goal. And Luke, no field goals, and Tony, a little bit of time. But just for a team that was so deep on bigs, it was really important for one of them to step up in this one more than anything else.
Yeah, I was really happy for Kennedy because he was somebody who I think for 4 years, confidence was a big thing with him. Sometimes the lack of confidence was a really big thing with him. And he was, I just always enjoyed being around Kennedy. He had kind of a big personality, but he was a pretty sensitive guy, is a pretty sensitive guy. And I think sometimes, the criticism of people, coach getting on him. Coach said, he was on him hard for 4 years, and Kennedy talked about how coach was on him hard for 4 years, but in the end, he understood why. He appreciated, it's easier when you win a national championship and you reflect back. It's a lot easier to kind of see what coach was doing, but so it was something I remember talking to Kennedy throughout the NCAA tournament about trying, tell him, hey, you're 5 rebounds away from passing so and so for 6 plates, and think about that, I remember before the Oregon game, it was either shoot around or the practice the day before. I can't remember which, but we were in the dome all by ourselves, just the team, and he was sitting, putting his shoes on or taking them off, and I sat down next to him and I said, "Do you know how many Carolina basketball players have played?" And he's like, "No, I said, hundreds, thousands of." I said, "Do you know how many people have more rebounds than you do?" And he's like, "I don't know." I said, "Well, right now it's 5." He's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, 5." I said, "And if you get just a few more, you're going to pass Bryce, and there's only going to be 4." And he did that in this game. He passed Bryce, and it was just really cool afterwards. He was so pumped because he knew that he played historically well in that game. And there's some things we can get into about. His number. He didn't just have a good game. He had a historically good game. It was really cool to see for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you about, obviously you're working with the team day to day, so like, how much of your job do you see it as like those morale boosting things where you're like, hey, you're this close to passing this guy or whatever? Like, how do you keep guys motivated in that way?
Well, not too much. I try not to coach the team. But when you're around him every day, for 4 years, like in Kennedy's case, you, you get to know him more than just as their public relations person or, their guy that's turning out stats and notes and things like that. And, you do get to know him. And I think with certain guys, there are some guys that I don't say a word to the entire time they're there. And the other guys that, you kind of, you can say certain things and encourage them in certain ways, and they pick up on that. And I think with Kennedy, that was something that, we didn't really talk a whole lot the 4 years, but I know during the NCAA tournament, we started talking about sort of his place in history and how really, what a really good player, and he's not a guy whose jersey's in disaster. Certainly could be, very close to being. So sometimes, people, I don't think, remember those guys as much, and they should. And I wanted to make sure that Kennedy knew his place in history. Now, it certainly would have been, and it is augmented by the fact that they won a national championship, and he was a huge part of that throughout that NCAA tournament. So it depends on the guy, but with Kennedy, there's certain ways that I think Kennedy was motivated by, and I think again, I think that confidence level, keeping that up, was really important. And Hubert Davis talked to him a lot throughout his time. And Hubert would get on him and got on him hard late in that season about making sure that you're running out of chances, you're running out of time, you got to do this now. After the Kentucky or before the Kentucky game, it was I remember being in the team meeting room before the practice day before they played Kentucky, and Kennedy had not played well against Butler. And coach kind of jumped him hard before practice, before the Kentucky game, because I think guys knew what a monumental challenge that Kentucky team was going to be. And it's great, you win 3 games, you beat Butler, you win your first 3 games of the tournament, you beat Butler, and then everybody's like, wow, then you got to just turn around immediately and think about, you got to beat Kentucky now. If you want to go further, you're just halfway there. And now you got to play Kentucky. And I think Coach, Kennedy hadn't played great and really got the guys' attention and Kennedy's attention before that Kentucky game. And then you think about it, the Kentucky game, Oregon, and Gonzaga. I mean, Coach Williams said it in the book we did. That's as well played stretch of games by any low post player in Coach's history, is what he said about Kennedy's play. And that's why not just the Oregon game, but as you mentioned earlier, Ryan, the Kentucky game, he had 17 rebounds, and then the last minute in particular against Gonzaga, he was huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of the accolades and stuff, there's obviously a case for him to win MVP. I think Joe Barry ends up winning it mostly for his performance in the title game, I think, but if you look at what Meeks had in this game, 25 and 14, and then 8 of the boards were offensive, just dominating in stretches. There was one point where him and Justin Jackson combined for 21 straight points for UNC. But I want to talk about this debate between Meeks and Joel Berry, and I think you could throw Justin Jackson in there too, because he had 2 decent games in the Final Four. But if y'all were in charge of picking the MVP, who would what would be your pick?
Oh my gosh. I think first you have to define MOP. If how much does a title game weigh? Is it like a 60-40 split? Is it 50-50 between that and Final Four? So I think I'd have to define that first. I don't know, Steve, do you know, historically, if a title game has been more slanted in voting?
I don't think I know there is no rule. There's no definition. Like you said, it's the Final Four most outstanding players. You think, okay, well, you kind of give equal weight, but I don't think that's the case. And I think in this case in particular, I think Joel scoring 22 points, the big 3 from the wing against Gonzaga late, the free throws late. I think Joel's final game performance, and that's when people are voting. I don't know. I think it's only 7 people that they select. It's not like the whole media corps. I think they pick a panel of, I think it's 7 people, and it's right after the national championship game. And Joel hits that huge 3 late in the game. That was kind of that was probably the signature play until the last minute when Kennedy's defensive plays. He gets an offensive rebound that leads to Isaiah's basket, which was arguably one of the biggest baskets of the game. He gets the block shot with under 30 seconds to go or so, and that leads to the run out by Jackson. So that was 12 seconds to go, and then he gets the steal on the last gas play. So he makes 3 big plays in the last minute, but he only had 7 points. So I do think, just based on he had the national semifinals. Again, he he had a field goal percentage, and he was 11 for 13, which is like, it's up there, and there's a list of guys, and it's like Larry Bird, Bill Walton, guys like that, Elvin Hayes that had, that kind of a national field goal percentage in a national semifinal game. But he had 7 points in the championship game, and that's what I think. I think people who are voting, the people who are voting, they're looking at it, and they got a stat monitor in front of them, and they see he's got 7 points, and they see Joel Berry's got 22 points. So I think you could have made the case for either. I really do. I've gone back and forth myself. I think Kennedy probably had certainly had the better semifinal game. Joel had more of an offensive game in the finals. So I think the hard part is the way we do honored jerseys and in the rafters and things like that the criteria, one of the criteria is Final Four most outstanding player as picked at the Final Four. And in both of their cases, Kennedy's and Joel's, even though they both had great careers, neither one of them had another criteria that got up there. So that was the one criteria that would have got both Joel and Kennedy. Now Joel had another year to do more, but so I remember walking to the bus with Kennedy after the national championship game, and it was just two of us. We were walking out of the stadium there in Phoenix, and he looked at me and said, "I don't get in the rafters now, do I?" And my heart sank, and I just said, "Not right now, no." And he said, "Okay." He goes, "That's okay." He goes, "I'm on the other end." He goes, "I'm going to be on the other end of the building, the national championship banner." So that was pretty cool. But I'll always remember him asking me that.
Yeah, you got to feel for him. I think the thing about Joe Berry's performance is no one really shot well in that game. He didn't shoot well either, but just the timeliness of the shots, like you said, like a huge three. I just remember, just every time they needed a bucket, it felt like it was Joel Berry. Let's get into the final minute of this game against Oregon. So,
Ryan, may I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
One other thing about Joel Berry that needs to be, and I think was part of the mind that I think it was appropriate, was he played on 2 sprained ankles for 2 games, and that position, he ran the team, and even though he didn't shoot well in the Oregon game, he was 2 for 14 from the floor. He still had a really good floor game. He only had a couple of assists, but still, it was his command. The fact that we went in, we didn't know if he was going to play. And I know a couple of national writers, my friend Seth Davis being one of them, was talking about us sandbagging before the Arkansas game, how hurt he was, and then sandbagging how he was, going into Phoenix. But you got to remember, he almost didn't play in the Kentucky game because of a sprained ankle. And then in practice, the day before the Kentucky game, in our closed practice, he hurts his ankle again and has to be helped off the floor to the training room in Memphis. And I was on the other end of the court, and he goes out to the training room or to the locker room, and like everyone's just standing there, like looking around, going, "Okay, Joel just had to leave the court because he got hurt." And for about 18 or 20 minutes, he didn't come back to practice. And you talk about a pit in your stomach. So then he gets through, and the reason we flew to Phoenix when we did was because of Joel's ankle. We usually go to the Final Four on a Wednesday. Well, that actually, when Coach Smith was coach, my first Final Four that I went to him with him in 91 and 93, we went on Friday. We flew up on the morning of the practice day, press conference day, and then it got back up to Thursday, and then by 98 we were going on Wednesday because it was San Antonio. Well, we went on Tuesday to Phoenix, and the only reason we went on Tuesday because we were so concerned about his ankle swelling up on the flight, the 4 or 5 hour flight, that's why we went a day early. And so for him to gut it out on 2 bad ankles, that I think is part of the reason why, and that's why I've always felt very comfortable with him being the MVP, because how banged up he was those 2 games.
Yeah. I think you can kind of tell he was a little ginger in that Oregon game. He took like 8 of his 14 shots were threes. He wasn't trying to blow by everyone at every opportunity. But yeah, just a super gutty performance by him. Yeah, let's run through the final minute of this game. So let me see if I can find it. Okay, UNC's up 6. Dorsey hit the 3 that just dives on the rim and goes in. And
craziest bounce I've seen in I don't even know how long.
Yeah,
it was on like I can't even describe it. I forgot all about that. It was absurd.
Yeah. So every UNC fan, including my dad, is just panicking at that point. Theo misses a runner. There's kind of a scramble after that. Oregon gets a layup, and then there's 5 seconds left. UNC immediately inbounds to Meeks, and at that point he's 3 for 4 from the line, having the game of his life. So you're thinking he'll probably make at least one of these 2. He misses both. Hinson taps it out to Barry. He gets fouled, and now you're thinking, all right, done deal. 77% from the line that season was Joel Barry. He misses both, and the funny part about before Meeks misses that second one is Jim Nance goes, "Oh, Ducks are going to get their chance. They're about to come down on the other end." And they never do, obviously, because Hinson taps it out. Barry shoots 2. He misses both, and then Jordan Bell doesn't box out Kennedy Meeks, and he just falls up the rebounds and goes
under the rim.
And
happened to me a million times.
Well, and Jordan Bell had 16 rebounds in that game. He had 12 defensive rebounds, 16 total rebounds. He was fantastic in that game, and it's one of that's one of those when it gets down to the last minute of any game, but in particular a tournament game when it's win in advance, lose and go home. That last minute, you're up 6. We were down 8 in the first half, but there's a lot of time left. We're not playing well at all. The game kind of slows down a little bit, but all of a sudden you're up 6 with 50-something seconds to go. I think you said, and it just goes by. You think, okay, hey, we're up 6, we're feeling pretty good. I'd rather be up 6 than be in their position. But then all of a sudden, a fluky 3. We kind of rush a shot, if I remember right.
Yep.
They come down, they score, and in a blink, you go from, hey, I'm feeling pretty good, maybe we're going to advance, to, oh my God, it's a 1-point game. And even if we make both free throws, right, and how hard is that to do late in the game? But even if they could still tie with a 3. So, and knowing what had happened the year before in the Villanova game, how things changed so quick in a minute. That's what I just remember sitting there going, the last minute just was like a speed race. It was just flying by. Things were changing so quickly, and your hopes are either feeling good, oh my God, and just. But what did it come down to? The little things like Coach Williams preaches, tipping the ball out, and getting Theo's tip out was just enormous. And it was just typical. I mean, he had a good game. I mean, he didn't shoot well. I think he was 2 for 8, but he had 8 points and 8 boards and a bunch of assists. But that play there, that's like the signature Theo little play that maybe 20 years from now people don't remember, but was just huge. And obviously Kennedy's rebound. And if we had lost, if missing the 2 free throws, if they'd have then, oh my God, I don't know, Kennedy, I don't think he would have handled that. It was huge for him to get that board.
Those tip outs, that's why Tyson Chandler's still in the NBA. That's his specialty at age 40. The interesting part after that Dorsey 3, I wrote it down, is like there were good 35 seconds of just uninterrupted gameplay. And whenever there's under a minute left and team's up 1, you're like, all right, back and forth, free throw shot. UNC had that possession. Oregon had this wild possession where someone was on the ground and threw it up to Pritchard, and he just avoided not traveling, and some guy off the bench hits that layup. And it was 30 seconds of just kind of chaos, which I forgot. It wasn't slower. It was from 40 seconds to 5 seconds, real quick.
Yeah, and that's when you're sitting there in your courtside and all that's going. It does seem chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It always you always watch these games, and a lot of times, no matter the sport, football, basketball, whatever it may be, a lot of times late in the game, these crazy things happen, right? and you go, you point the finger at the coach. Why didn't the coach, think about doing this, or why did the player have a brain lock, and why did they screw that up? And you realize though, when you're in that moment, it does get crazy. It does get chaotic, and it's just the weight of it sometimes is just so much. I mean, just the difference between. That's why I was amazed about. If you look at Carolina basketball's national championships, 57 goes to 2 triple overtimes in a row, right? 82 is a 1-point game. 93 comes down to late free throws at the end and the timeout call and all that. 05 is a tip in, but Marvin tips it in. 09 is the only one where the game was one-sided. And then the national championship games that we've lost, there were a couple that could have gone either way too. I mean, I watched the 81 game a couple years ago where we lost to Indiana, and I think we lost by 11. And you go, well, that wasn't really a close game. But then you look at the game and you actually watch it, and it's just and that's the thing, you get in this last minute of the Oregon, and it's just zooming by, and you want to say, whoa, slow down, do that over again, and it doesn't. It just goes by. I need to watch that last minute again, because I don't remember all the details of the part from 50 seconds to 5 seconds. I just remember kind of the last 5. But it's just that chaos of that moment that gets really crazy.
Yeah. Sorry, give me 1 second. So they win it on the glass. They say it in the broadcast, the best rebound team in the country, and they get the 2 offensive rebounds at the end to seal the deal. They out-rebounded teams in the tournament. UNC out-rebounded teams in the tournament 252 to 198 over those 6 games. And, what stuck out to me was just the big depth of UNC. The fact that Luke Macon had the game of his life against Kentucky, and then, he gets thrown in this game. He picks up 2 fouls. He never finds really his rhythm. But just the luxury that Roy had to just say, all right, let me throw Hicks back in. Let me throw Bradley in there. Let me do this. Let me do that. I think if you compare that to the last few years, I think that's what UNC's been missing, is that big depth and just that luxury that Roy has of just throwing different bodies out and just wearing out the other team on the glass.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, that, Hicks, I think part of the reason that Hicks struggled, Bradley didn't really get off offensively, only played 10 minutes, but he did have 6 rebounds. Luke, like you said, I mean, Luke, how many regional MVP then goes 0 for 3 from the floor in the next game, and I mean, he didn't make a field goal the entire Final Four. I mean, he had 2 free throws. That was it. But I think part of that was the energy that they expended on the other end of the floor, guarding Bell and Dylan Brooks. I mean, those guys had 9 turnovers between them, so it wasn't like the bigs didn't do anything. Everybody struggled. I mean, you take away Justin and Kennedy, they were a combined, I think, what did I write? They were combined 17 of 26 from the floor. So that's fantastic, those 2 guys. The rest of the team was 8 for 42. I mean, Hicks was 1 for 12, just couldn't buy anything that game. But the ability to put body after body, and that's why Coach, tries to recruit depth. He wants to play 8, 9 guys, 10 guys, and particularly bigs, because they're going to get in foul trouble. They're going to get tired. They're going to get hurt during the year. And this year, obviously, there were so many crazy injuries. I don't know how much depth. You can't plan for the number of injuries that the 1920 team had. Had just Cole gotten hurt or just Brandon gotten hurt, but the fact that so many guys got hurt. But you're right. I totally agree with you that in this game, the front court depth and the ability of, I said we were down 8 at the end of the first half. Well, we outscored them 17-6 to end the half, the last 3.5 minutes, and 5 different guys scored in that stretch. It wasn't just, late you were talking about how Kennedy and Justin, they went off. Well, in that stretch, including Nate Britt. I mean, Nate Britt, he, talk about big, the end of the first half when we were down 30-22, he hits a big 3, and then he has a beautiful pass to Kennedy for a basket, and we get 5 quick points because of Nate Britt. And he didn't turn the ball over that game at all. And that I was so happy for him. Same with Kennedy. These guys you get to know for 4 years, and maybe their career doesn't go exactly how they planned or how other people expected it to go. But in the biggest moment when Joel was banged up a little bit and Nate comes in, I mean, one of the biggest threes of the game is Nate Britt hitting a three when we were down in the first half against Oregon and struggling. So that's kind of cool when you see those guys contribute like that.
Yeah, I noticed. Forgot that Oregon was really bringing like a half-court trap of sorts, really throughout, especially in the first half. And when Britt was in there, as opposed to Barry or basically anybody, like UNC was pretty unfazed. Like they're getting double team right at half court, and the passes are just like not nonchalant, but like they know where they're going. Like there weren't many turnovers from that. And yeah, I thought Britt and Seventh Woods both had little good spurts in the first half, which more just speaks to the depth. And especially with Nate to have another veteran point guard guy like that. I think even Stillman White got some minutes late in the first, and I don't think he did anything like that was flashy, but he didn't do anything wrong either. He was there and he handled the ball, and
forgot how good
that.
Go ahead,
Ryan.
I forgot how good Theo was at handling the ball and handling the pressure. He's just so good at filling in all the gaps at whatever a team needs. He had 8, 8, and 5 in this game. I think he's the best UNC player that I've seen that can just impact the game without scoring. He has 2 great passes to Meeks to stretch the lead out in the second half. And, yeah, I mean, I think he's just the ultimate glue guy that I've seen in my lifetime watching UNC.
Think of that game. I mean, we had 11 turnovers. Justin had 4 of them. But we had like 5 guys who could handle the ball. And Oregon, their athleticism, we hadn't seen them obviously all year, and they beat Kansas, if I remember right. They beat Kansas pretty easily, which going into it, when you're always in the tournament, you're always worried about your bracket, but you're always keeping an eye on the other brackets to see which are the strong, especially when you have a team that has a national championship contending team. I mean, there are some years where you go in and you're thinking, okay, let's get to the regional. Let's get to that second weekend and see what we can do. And then there are years like 17 where you're like, hey, this team could be playing on Monday night. So those years you're really following the other brackets to see, maybe a top seed get upset or something. And I remember the night. I think Oregon beat Kansas the night before we played Kentucky. So I was actually with a group of local media, and we were at a restaurant bar next to our hotel in Memphis, and we were watching the Kansas-Oregon game, and everybody, the Mark Armstrongs of the world, Luke DeCox and all, that they were there. We were all like, uh-oh, Oregon's pretty good, folks. They're beating the hell out of Kansas here. Even if we get by Kentucky, now we got to, we'd have to play Oregon. So you're always watching that, but we had 5 guys. I mean, I think Joel, Theo's basically a second point guard on the floor, and then Stillman 7th and Nate. So I think one of the keys of that game was only committing 11 turnovers, and one of it was coach being willing to trust Stillman for a minute, and 7th for a few minutes, and Nate for 10 minutes, and giving Joel, with his 2 ankles, a little bit of a break occasionally. But not killing ourselves. I think we ended up scoring more points off turnovers than they did, and then we had them on the second chance points too. So in a close game, 1-point game, those things are huge.
Yeah, that Oregon team was an interesting one. Kind of just like, I mean, they had a good record, but it felt like they were kind of peaking at the right time. I mean, Dylan Brooks is killing it in the NBA now, and Dorsey went from, I think the broadcast said 14 points in the regular season to like 24 in the tournament.
He was shooting like 3, they said.
Yeah, and Bell's an awesome glue guy, and Peyton Pritchard in his career is one of like the Pac-12's like best statistical players, and like Chris Boucher, the 7'1" unicorn as they called him, was hurt, and I totally forgot he was on that team, so I'm wondering how that would have impacted it. But I mean, then they had that Dylan Ennis guy who had like 19 shots. He was like one of the only players to start 25 games at 3 different schools, so like. He's a journeyman. It was just an interesting team to go up against, and one of those teams that, I mean, like you're saying, Steve, like a team that you get scared of. That's kind of, they beat Kansas, and they're like, oh, okay, they're here now.
Well, that team, I didn't know a whole lot about that team. I knew Bell. Um, Pritchard was a young guy who, we just played him in the Bahamas, back in November. Um, but they Justin did a really good job. He had Dorsey, I think, and he ended up holding Dorsey to 3 for 11. Ennis made a couple of big threes back to back in the first half when that's how we got down 8. But like I said, he took 19 shots. He was only 7 of 19. So we didn't shoot well. I remember looking up a note I've got here that it was the lowest field goal percent. We shot 36.8. That was our lowest field goal percentage in an NCAA tournament win in 40 years, since 1967. But they shot a little bit better than us. They were shot 37.9. But what kept them in the game is they killed us at the free throw line. We missed 8 free throws. They were 25 for 28. And then obviously the 4 in the last 5 seconds that we missed. But they were really athletic. And it's one of those games, the Final Four games, particularly the national semifinal game, is always a kind of a weird vibe, weird feeling to the first half, right? You're in this dome, first of all, that you haven't played in that kind of an arena, with few exceptions. Like in 2009, we had played in Ford against Michigan State in the Big Ten Challenge. But for the most part, you're playing in a completely foreign environment in terms of the size of the stadium. And you've had this huge build-up to the week since you got to the Final Four, which is a celebration just second to winning the national championship, is getting to the Final Four. And you've got all the buildup of the media obligations and the CBS obligations and all of the send-offs and the revelry that goes with being in the Final Four. And then all of a sudden, the game happens. And I've been very fortunate at UNC, I think 11 times to go with UNC to the Final Four. And that semifinal is always a bizarre start. You all of a sudden you look up and you go, oh my God, there's 3 minutes left in the first half of the national semifinal. We're not playing well. We're not playing like we have all year. We're not playing like we have certainly the last 4 games to get to this point. And sometimes the game gets out of hand before you get into it. That happened to us in the Utah game in '98. It happened to us in the Florida game in 2000 a little bit, where all of a sudden the game is just it's about just a strange vibe to how that game starts. And that's, I think, kind of what happened here. Is both teams were bad in the first half. It ended up with us with a 3-point lead, 3-point lead, but we had 18 points with about 6 minutes left in the first half, I think, and we just were not into the game. And I think a lot of that is just the natural difficulty of getting into that semifinal.
What was the thinking for Dean Smith to get there so late? Was it avoiding all that build-up and all that hoopla, and letting guys just have the normal routine at class and stuff like that?
You nailed it. Normal routine. Absolute 100% normal routine. Coach Smith was... I was here from 88 to 97 with Coach Smith. And as far as I know, and in terms of talking to other people, we never did a shoot-around. Now, shoot-around is just as much part of game day as the actual game is. Mm-hmm. So he never did a shoot-around. And his thing was, guys are much more comfortable if they're sleeping in their own bed, they're home. Our practice is, at the Smith Center, where it's quiet and there's no distractions, and the focus is on just preparing for the game. And I remember it in 91 in Indy and 93 in New Orleans. I remember in New Orleans vividly. We because Rick Brewer, Dave Lozzi, and I stayed across the Superdome is connected to I think it's the Hyatt in New Orleans by like a bridgeway, just a walkway. And I remember we landed, and the team went straight to the Superdome, and Lozzi and I went to the Superdome. We got our bags off the bus and ran them over to the hotel real quick, and then went back to the Superdome, and we had practice. We had our press conference, and that was it. And then at some point they added a Thursday media day, so now you had to get out there the day before. And then in San Antonio, I know one of the reasons we went out early in San Antonio was the McDonald's All-America game was on Wednesday night, and Ronald Curry was going to be playing in it, and Ronald had signed with us, and guys wanted to watch Ronald play. So we didn't want to fly out Wednesday night. We wanted to be able to see the game, so we flew out earlier. And just I think the coaches at that point, we'd been in the Final Four in '97 and '95 and '93, and I think the assistant coaches were like with Coach Guthridge, it's better if we get there earlier and let the kids get around and see the city and just kind of get into the feel of the Final Four. So that's when I think '98 we started going Wednesday. So every time after that it would be on Wednesday. And like I said, the only reason we went out on Tuesday was because of Joel's ankle, which I think in retrospect was really good because our first practice in Phoenix was at Arizona State. And I don't know if you guys remember, but that was the day that Coach Williams got kicked in the face. And I'm laughing like I'm an idiot here. I'm laughing at Coach Williams. I don't mean he got, but he did. It was right next to me. They were doing a drill, and somebody threw a bounce pass, and Isaiah stuck his leg out like goalie, like a kick save, and he kicked the ball, went right off Isaiah's foot, about 5 feet away. Coach Williams was standing under the basket, and it hit him right in the face, and he went down, and he has vertigo, and that sudden, getting hit like that triggered his vertigo. So for the rest of that practice, which was about another hour or so that we still had to go in that Wednesday practice, Coach Williams just sat in a folding chair off the edge of the court and really didn't say anything. Coach Robinson basically ran the last hour of that practice. And I was terrified that was going to affect Coach the rest of the week. But amazingly, that was the only day that as far as I know, that was the only day that it really bothered him. But it's kind of strange that you're getting ready to play in the national semifinals and your coach is sitting on a chair because he just got kicked in the face by Isaiah. It was a very odd way to start practice out in Phoenix.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I never heard that. I mean, yeah, wow.
It had happened the year before.
I glossed over that.
The year before, it had happened the very first game of the year up in Annapolis when we played Temple in that Veterans Day Classic. In shoot-around, the day of the game, somebody had thrown a pass, and he was standing on the baseline, and someone threw a pass, and the guy that they threw it to didn't see it, and it just kind of came through and hit him. And it didn't happen nearly as bad. It happened when we were in the Carrier Classic on the aircraft carrier in 2011. He was just in shoot around the morning of the game, so we're on this aircraft carrier, which to me didn't move at all. I mean, it's city blocks long. These aircraft, they're massive. So I'm standing on the aircraft carrier, and I didn't notice any kind of movement, but Coach said he really picked up on the carrier being in the water. So when the team, that was, I don't know, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., whatever it was, when the team came back around 4 o'clock, I was up on the top of the aircraft carrier, and I was looking down like about 6 stories to the street where the team was getting off the bus. And as soon as I saw Coach Williams get off the bus, I was like, oh my God. He could barely move. He was like walking like an inch at a time, and then you walk into the bottom of the aircraft carrier and you get on like an elevated platform, and the platform brings you up 6 stories to the deck. And when he got off, he said, "Man, my vertigo's this morning's shoot around." So when he had a vertigo, you never know how long it's gonna. Usually, it just lasts a day or so. But here you are on Wednesday before the semifinals. I was very nervous. So when I saw him on Thursday and he was like, "Yeah, I'm okay," that was a big that was a big deal because we were worried about that.
That's crazy. I can't imagine if that had affected a UNC title run. How do you keep the guys because we were talking about the normal routine and stuff. How do you keep the guys psychologically balanced and centered when there's so much hoopla going on and when there's so much crazy stuff media wise? how do you think coach manages that, and how do you or whoever else try to manage that within the program as well?
Well, I think we're blessed that we have a coach with what 42 years of experience as an assistant, and then Kansas and North Carolina, where for most of those 42 years, being part of the national championship picture, that's part of it. So I think he accepts that there are going to be certain distractions. There are going to be certain carve out times in your schedule that are for non basketball teaching moments. I mean, there's going to be a rally, there's going to be a banquet, there's going to be media, there's going to be green screen shoots with smoke and mirrors and mascots and fake crowds, and there's going to be this stuff. It's part of the week. And the sooner that I think, and all of our coaches have dealt with it in this way, the sooner you just accept as a coach, hey, these are how can we minimize, don't make a big deal out of them. If you make a big deal out of them in front of your team, then your team will pick up on that. And just say, hey guys, think of the other 64 teams and think of the other 358 teams or whatever it is who would love to be having these distractions, right? So if you go into it just understanding that they're going to be there, and one of the things I've been very lucky with is Coach Williams, particularly with me, he's like, look, just tell me where to be and when to be there, okay? And you and Eric Hoots and Sean May and Brad Frederick, whoever it may be, Jared Haas, through these, Joe Holly, you guys deal with the schedule. And you tell them, put on there all the obligations we have to do, and where do I have to be there, and when do I have to, and I'll do it. And that's the way we approach it with the team is, guys, hey, I maybe another media session, maybe that's not what you want to do right now, but just think of all the other guys in the country who would kill to be in your position, and enjoy it and have fun with it. And for the most part, I think our guys do have fun with it. It's I always give our guys, a ton of credit, win or lose, particularly, when you lose the game, you got to open that locker room. And you got to have a microphone and camera and explain why'd you do this, or tell me how hard it hurts or how bad it hurts or stuff like that. But I think our mentality of it is, if you're going to be a big time program, these are the things that come with it, and you just do it and don't worry about it and just schedule it out. And I think that's, this year, doing the all access thing with ESPN, the ACC network, that was so foreign for us to do. When we go to the Final Four, we have, some of our friends, Steve Shearer's worked with CBS and Turner forever, and every year we went to the Final Four, he was begging us to come on, let the CBS cameras be on the team plane and at the hotel and the meeting room and all that. And Coach every single year said no, because he said, I don't want to, that's not what we do when we play in January at Wake Forest, or that's not what we do when we just play we're playing Bucknell at home. I don't want to change my routine. And so we try and stick to our routine as much as we can, and then Coach just says, hey, you just tell me where to be.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you brought up the all access thing. I'm curious what the reasoning was behind doing that, because it is such a foreign thing, I think, for the way Roy Williams likes to run his program. So what was the thought process behind that?
Coach Williams and I have talked through the previous 16 years about how much we love watching all those all access shows, but that we never really wanted to be part of those all access shows. Yeah. And I think it was always a little bit of superstition, partly superstition, like, hey, things are going well. We're doing well without having to do an all access piece. And what would happen if we did? Well, great. We go 14-19, although obviously that had nothing to do with it. But then the other is just, I think, the fact that some of our competitors were doing these all access shows, and I think ESPN in particular, it just seemed like was giving a little bit more attention to certain schools. And it started with 2 years ago with Coach Williams allowed Allison Williams from ESPN to sit with him on the bus going over to NC State. We did that 2 years ago. Which was something that everybody thought, oh my God, I can't believe North Carolina did that. And it was kind of the first step into it. And it's hard. I mean, I think it's just particular when when you have when you're in, everything is based on recruiting, right? And you know, the competitive nature of recruiting. And I think seeing other schools, and not just the basketball schools. I mean, you know, Clemson football, Alabama football, some of the different pieces that have been out there. And we know that if people get a chance to see Coach Williams and the team be around each other, that's something that some kid watching it who's picking a school, they're going to say, wow, I'd like to be part of that. So I think purely from seeing what other schools are doing and making sure that we didn't want to get, you know, kind of left behind from a recruiting standpoint, I mean, that's overwhelmingly why we did it.
Mm-hmm. I got you. That's all I had as far as it feels like we drifted so far from this game, but that's all I had as far as the game. Did y'all have anything else you wanted to add about this game before we wrap this up?
I definitely want to hear. I know, Steve, you have a list of post-game notes. Let me see if I have anything. I think we covered about everything. Just this 16 offensive rebounds per game average entering the tournament final is crazy. And UNC was 21. I guess they were 20-0 with 16 plus second chance points. I'm not sure if they reached that mark in this game, but if so, they finished the season a perfect 21-0 with 16 plus second chance points. So that speaks exactly to what you were saying. Yeah, I think that's about everything I had. One of those Pinson to Meeks passes was kind of almost behind the head, falling out of bounds, and I thought that one was just the most impressive. I definitely rewound and watched that a second time because I was like, how did he throw that? And it was really like that as he was falling out of bounds. So that connection was big.
That was really cool. One of my favorite thoughts of not just the Oregon game but also the Gonzaga game was how much Theo shone in that spotlight and how he just completely embraced the moment of being at the Final Four. That was his. I mean, yeah, he played a big role the previous year, but that senior year, you know, the team really took on his personality. He was, you know, Justin was kind of a quiet leader and Joel was a fiery leader, but Theo was he was the emotional leader, and that's why when he got hurt earlier in the year, when he missed those games, I mean, it was so devastating to the team. I mean, people forget, you know, he kind of locked himself in his apartment for a day and just, I mean, they had to, Sean May and Hoots and Doug Halverson had to go over and make sure he was okay because, you know, that stretch in January where he had to sit and we thought he'd broken his foot to the point where, you know, he couldn't come back a game. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be that bad. But there was some, you know, he was such the emotional leader, so it was so cool to see him in front of, you know, 78,000 people and everybody watching, for him to play, and it was very quintessential Theo. It wasn't just scoring, it was the tip outs, those loose balls, the breakout dunk, you know, just different things that Theo did that gave us such an emotional energy. So, you know, I always like to see kids play their best and they're in the biggest moment. And, you know, whether it's Nate Brett hitting a big shot, you know, you can always say, man, I helped us win a national championship. When we needed a bucket, I hit a big three. And Theo, all the plays that he did. So, you know, and he said the second chance points, we had 19. You know, we won that battle. The rebounding was tied. It was one of the few games. It was like one of 5 games all year where we did not rebound the opponents, but it was even. But, you know, their front court was pretty good too. And the fact, though, what do you remember most about that game? 2 offensive rebounds in the last 5 seconds is how Carolina secured it. So that pretty much, like you said, this fits in with the story of the whole season.
Absolutely. Just super indicative of this Carolina team and the things they were able to do. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you, Steve, for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Steve. Thank you.
A lot of fun.
Absolutely. That was fun.
Thanks, for hopping on. And, yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you'll tune in next time. And, yep, see you soon.